Hello, everyone at SOI. So we just finished up an awesome presentation with Grant, and next up we have Lily. Lily is an alumni from 2023, and she works currently at the Center for Public Impact. And today, Lily's going to be talking about human-centered design for everyday problem solving. So yeah, I'll let Lily, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michaela. And hello, everyone. I can't see your screens, but I'm sure you're all smiling. So excited for the presentation. I'm just so honored and excited to be with y'all today at this virtual alumni summit. So thanks for taking the time to join this session. My name is Lily, as Michaela said, and over the next hour or so, maybe slightly less, depending on the chat interaction, we're going to learn what I consider a superpower for problem solving, which is called human-centered design. It's something that you can use in your everyday life, every part of your life. It can be used in school. It can be used in your community work, in your actual work, or even just figuring out your next move more personally. So I'm going to dive into what we're going to be doing in this next hour. All right, so we'll spend about 10 minutes welcoming, giving a little bit of intro. Who am I? What are we doing here? I'll do a bigger intro on what is human-centered design. Maybe some of y'all are pretty familiar with it, others not so much. So we'll just give a baseline so we're all on the same page. I'm then going to share an example from my work at the Center for Public Impact, giving you a little bit of an in-depth of what does it look like if you do this process and what are some of the outcomes. Then I'm going to turn it all over to you. We're going to do a mock case study. Don't worry, it's not scary. I'm just going to ask a couple questions and ask that you use the chat to do some interaction, and it should be pretty fun. And then we'll close up. If you have any questions for me, happy to answer them. If anything's getting you excited about this, I'm also happy to chat more about the Center for Public Impact and human-centered design writ large or government innovation. But with that, I'm going to start us off. So here's a slide just explaining who I am. I won't go too in depth here. I think the things that really matter here is I'm a proud alum of the 2023 Blue Futures Pathways Expedition, where we went down the west coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. So I've been where you all have been. For the last 5 or so years, though, I've been working at the intersection of innovation and government, specifically local government in the United States, as well as some Canadian cities, so we'll get to that. But that's really where my passion and my expertise in human-centered design comes from. I spend my days helping local governments rethink and redesign systems.
Go ahead. Just gonna jump in real quick. It doesn't look like you're sharing your slides currently.
Oh, okay. Let me try one more time.
Okay.
Sharing now?
Yep, it looks like we can see them now, so I will bring those live, but they're not quite full screen if you want to go presenter mode.
They are on mine, so one sec.
Yeah, no worries.
Presenter view. How does that look?
It still is showing your full screen, unfortunately.
Okay, and does this work?
Let's see. Unfortunately not. Here, you can see what we're seeing now as well, so.
Oh, wait, okay. All right, play from the, what about now?
Oh. No, it still just seems to be an issue with Keynote or whichever platform you're using, but I'm not sure why it's not going full screen for you.
Okay.
We had it working a second ago, and now we've lost it. Technology.
Okay. Can folks see it like this? I'm not sure how else to present it.
We had it working a second ago. Yeah, maybe just a close and refresh will be the solution.
Okay. Sorry, y'all. Just working through some tech. Share my screen. This. Okay. And then if I go slideshow, what does that look like?
Still not quite full screen. The other solution we have here is that I will be able to present for you. You'll have to tell me to go to the next slide, but that's quite okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks, Mac.
No worries. Just give me 1 second to deal with my technical side of things. Let's see if this will work for us. Okay, how does that look? Is that better?
Looks great on my end.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, just let me know when to go to the next slide. We can
Yeah.
keep
Could
the
you
show
go 2
rolling.
slides ahead?
Certainly. I'm going
Thank
to disappear now. Back over to you, Lily.
Thanks, Mac. Okay, perfect. So here's some facts if interested about me. But yeah, really the high level is I did the expedition 2023 with students on ice, and it was just so inspiring. The little picture on the bottom is me on the Polar Prince, and I've met some of y'all there as well. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm talking about human-centered design today. It's really a method for doing problem solving differently. But how have I really used it and in what context? What is this place called the Center for Public Impact? And how do I actually know what I'm talking about? Really, we worked with cities all across the world, specifically, like I said, in North America. So from places like Moncton, New Brunswick, to Honolulu, Hawaii, to even down in Florida with Miami. And the principle is really all the same. You have to listen to people on the ground first before making decisions. Normally, I work with cities, sometimes counties, sometimes even states or organizations such as Google that are really looking to redesign how they work and their systems. So, their culture, also how they look at problems, how they address them. And human centered design is a phrase that's kind of just a fancy way of knowing how to do that. One more thing. Sorry, I'll just go back. Sorry for the pause, Mac. I just want to mention that human centered design isn't just an abstract theory we talk about in corporate settings or things like this. It's really an applied, real framework that you can use to solve complex real world problems in places all mentioned here as well as more. So it proves that when you do put people first, you put them at the core of how you make decisions, how you think about a problem, even, you can tackle challenges that seem maybe impossible before. So now that you know a little bit about where I come from, where I gained this experience, let's actually get to the content of this, of what is human-centered design. So human-centered design is a mindset. Forget the jargon. We sometimes call it HCD. So if I reference it as that, it's the same thing. Again, it just means putting the people you're designing for right in the middle of the development process. It's designing with rather than for them. Think of it in a way, you can do one more slide, that the user is, oh, that is an old version of that slide deck. Sorry, Mac. Let me see if I can send you an email with the one I'm working off of. Real quickly. Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. And Mac, you should have just gotten that. Hope everyone's having a beautiful day, though. Did you end up getting the slide deck? Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, we're back in action, folks. All right, so human-centered design. It's really a creative approach to problem solving, and it puts the people, whether that's users, customers, stakeholders, affected party, wherever you're coming from, at the heart of the development process. So if you're building a new public park and you are working at a firm up there, You don't just sketch it out in the office. You go talk to the kids that would use it. You talk to the dog walkers. You talk to the seniors who will actually use it. You ask them what's working for them, what hurts them, and what are they dreaming about here. The ultimate goal is to create products, services, systems that aren't just cool or technologically possible or leveraging a really cool new design technique you want to put in the park, but one that's truly meeting the human needs at the current moment, as well as improving lives. Sometimes we design things that are meant for a moment 5 years in the past. Sometimes we're designing for an imaginary reality that we'll never actually see. And so, how can we design for the moment that we're hitting right now? And in that way, really listening deeply to people so we can improve their lives. The next slide really speaks to a quote that's emblematic of human-centered design. Those closest to the problem are often closest to the solution. It's really the foundation. So if you're solving any problem, and this doesn't have to be in a work setting, again, I come from the world of government innovation, so the examples I share will be a little bit city focused, but it's understanding how everything interconnects and how folks actually understand the system they're working within. So let's say you're trying to solve a problem of trash pickup in your neighborhood. And the solution is usually already known by the person who struggles with that trash bin every single day. They know the things they love about it. They know the things they dislike about it. And they also know probably some creative ways that they wish they could fix it. So our job as designers that we all are, now that we're in this room learning about human-centered design, is to ask the right questions as well as learn how to active listen. I'm going to try to utilize the chat now. And I have a quick chat prompt. And I'll give an example myself so you have some baseline is what's one everyday design? So whether it's a tool, an app, or maybe even a piece of furniture, it can be some of those physical things as well that you think was clearly not designed for people in mind. So something that you've seen in life that doesn't feel like it's actually meeting the needs of folks. The one I always think about is certain door handles. The way they're positioned on the door makes me think pull when really it's a push. And so they're designing it just in the way that maybe isn't actually what humans understand as push and pull. Does anyone else have any designs that they see in their life that maybe aren't designed with the people in mind? Another example could be cans that are impossible to open. The Amazon Prime app interface. Yup. Yup. And I'm sure they have some folks on that too. So that's interesting. I'll see if anyone else pops in. If not, I'll keep on moving along. Oh, Scott. So nothing's designed. Yep. My cutlery drawer completely. And so we see this in everyday life and how we interact with the world. There's a lot of things that are designed very well. And then there's some things that you can just see aren't meeting our needs. If they listen to the people that use it the most, such as someone jumping into their cutlery drawer or going on the app interface of Amazon, actually asking you the questions that help improve your experience, that's really where we can make progress here. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Art supply systems. Yes, Michaela. And just share a little bit of what are the key components of human-centered design. So there's a lot of different catchphrases and jargony words here. So I'll try to de-jargon it because these are really the 4 key ingredients that we need. Think about if you're making a recipe for success. These are the ingredients. So 1 is empathy. This is really the cornerstone of why we do human-centered design, how we enter every conversation, and how we connect with the people we're speaking to. Really means deeply understanding the target audience's experiences, emotions, motivations, and especially their context. You need to step into their own shoes to uncover both their explicit, so what they're telling you already. When you're asking those questions and you're talking to them, what are they telling you? As well as some of the latent, so unspoken or unrealized needs and pain points. Another key system here is iteration. Solutions are rarely perfect on the first try. And I think that's something that a lot of us feel. Whenever we do something, it must be perfect. It must really be that first draft and it's wonderful and you get a 10 out of 10 A+. Human-centered design really rejects that mentality. We know that if you fail early, fail fast, and fail small, you're actually going to have much more success because you can constantly build, test, and refine based on your users or your residents or your community and all the feedback they give for you. So iteration is just a fancy word of continuing to go back, get feedback, and change something. Another component of human-centered design is collaboration. Innovation, human-centered design, this broad, fun world, really thrives on diversity. So it requires multidisciplinary teams. So it actually reminds me quite a bit of how Students on Ice brings folks together on a ship. People are from all different places around the world. Folks have a lot of different lived experiences, work in a lot of different industries, are studying a lot of different things. They even have pretty large age ranges on some of the expeditions. And so that's really critical to understand how we can work together and co-create with folks that maybe think differently than ourselves. If you're doing this and you're all the same in one room, it's not going to work as well. And lastly, systems thinking. So anything we create for your community doesn't exist in isolation. You really must consider the bigger picture. It's part of a larger economic, social, cultural system and must integrate and align effectively within that. You can really look at the ripple effect here of how does that really affect the economic, the social, and even the environment. Next slide, please. Thank you, Mac. So we shared some key components, some catchphrases that you can keep close when you're thinking about human-centered design: empathy, collaboration, iterations, and working within systems. So now what do you actually do? Okay, you understand the mindset that you need to bring into this process, but what are you actually doing when you start a human-centered design process? There's really 3 key phases. And again, everyone's going to start a little different in how they've used human-centered design, but these are the core 3. The first one is the discovery phase. This is really where you're doing your homework. The goal is to build deep contextual understanding of the people you're designing for. So this is the phase where you're conducting interviews, you're doing research, observational research. So sometimes that just means sitting on a park bench and looking at a park and understanding how people are using it now. What are they not using? Why do we think that is? So it's really this information gathering phase so we can define the problem correctly. This is where you come in with a ton of assumptions about what the problem is, and then you come out completely changed, understanding that, yes, maybe some of those assumptions were correct, but we also are learning alongside everyone else. And they're going to actually upend some of our assumptions, which is exactly what we want in human-centered design and why it gives us more effective resident-centered solutions. The second phase is the solution phase. This is really the fun one. It's about creativity. And so there's 2 key components here. One is ideation, which is another fancy jargony term for just creatively thinking of ideas. So you're brainstorming a massive quantity of ideas to solve whatever problem you want to do. It's about quantity at this phase, not quality, again, which is a little bit different than how we normally work day to day. And then after we have all of these ideas, we choose some of our favorites, some of the most that are resident-centric, some of the ones we heard the most when we engaged folks that are actually closest to the problem, and we prototype them. So this is building rough, inexpensive test versions of what you're going to do. It could be as simple as a sketch on a piece of paper and showing that to folks and seeing their reaction. It could be a little bit more advanced, a cardboard model. Maybe you're using Legos even, or it could even be a quick video. I've done all of these when we do prototyping with residents. And the last phase is also the one that gets everyone excited. It's where you create real impact. It's where you bring your idea to life. You pilot it on a small scale, get that honest feedback, and then formally launch whatever program it is. Considering that you will probably have to iterate and you will probably still have to go back and tweak things that aren't perfect. But again, that's the whole concept of human-centered design and why it's so great. One thing I do want to mention here also is this process is circular. So there is a 1, 2, 3 in how it goes, but sometimes you might go to the solution phase and realize it's still not hitting the mark on what the problem is. So folks will go back to the first phase, conduct more interviews. Who did they not speak to? Whose perspective are we still missing? and then jump right back to the solution phase. So it's something that you can really do as a cycle of continuous improvement. And you can take whatever components you like from each phase and use it in your daily life without doing the whole 3-step process. Now we're going to jump into, okay, I think I understand the mindsets. I understand the 1, 2, 3 of how this works. How does it look like for a real life example? So we're going to dive into a city of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that worked with my organization last year, so pretty recently. So we can move on to one more slide. Thank you. So the city has a riverfront right through. You can see in the photo, that's mainly what I wanted you to see on this slide, that cuts right through the city. So the east side is on one and the west side is on the other side of the river. When we engaged with them, the mayor, their city council, recognized that the river felt underutilized. It didn't feel like a place that folks congregated at. They weren't excited to go downtown. There were other wonderful pockets of community where folks got excited to engage and collaborate, but not near the river. And so in the non-human centered design way, they were starting with, let's build a new plaza, or let's build a restaurant to attract people. And I put specifically on this slide, they ended up building an amphitheater near the river. Some big flashy thing that screams, oh, this is innovative. This is really what folks want. And sometimes that is innovation. It's doing the big flashy thing. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's doing the simple things that folks just need. But instead of just using human-centered design and creating another plaza, creating another restaurant, another amphitheater or concert hall, they entered with us and we started with the discovery phase. They first initially spoke to around 15 residents and learned how folks viewed the river. So really understanding, why isn't it that we go downtown? Is it because there aren't amenities there? Or is it something different? And what they learned here is residents' perceptions of the river were what stopped them from going downtown. They remembered that they had a huge flood back in 2008 that made folks think of the river as a negative part of their city. It was something that wiped out certain communities on the riverfront that were never allowed to be built on again because they were too flood prone. And so when folks thought about going down to the river, through interviews, they learned that it isn't a place that people felt safe in some interviews, as well as a place that felt thriving or worth their time compared to other wonderful neighborhoods around there. And so due to those devastating floods, they felt nervous, disconnected, or even afraid. So their insight from all of this and doing all these interviews and actually speaking to people is they needed to reframe their problem. It's not just an underutilized riverfront. It's more, how do we connect people emotionally to the river and help them feel joy as well as safety near it? It wasn't just about adding one other thing. It was reconstituting the mindset of how they interacted with the river as city residents. And one more thing, just to bring it back to the core concepts, this was all driven by the empathy of really sitting down for an hour with folks that were displaced by the river, with folks that live near there, with folks that have never even visited there, and just understanding what it is that the river holds for them. Next slide, please. Then again, always one of my favorite parts is, what did they come up with to change that mindset? And so during this solutioning phase, they held creative ideation sessions with the community, from nonprofit leaders to city council members to longtime residents to new residents, to hear a diversity of perspectives, which led them to 2 primary and albeit flashy concepts here to really recreate the river in a mindset that was more positive and joyful. So 2 ideas that rose to the top were zip lines all across the river, so not only over, but also on the sides, as well as a water light show. And so what do I mean when I say water light show? That actually is something that's in the water that sprays. If you've ever seen those fountains, those were some of the things that they thought, and the community actually fed them as great ideas. This is why this section is so important. It's where you're not only brainstorming ideas. I'm not coming into Cedar Rapids and saying, I think you should do a zip line and a water light show. I'm asking them to hold those ideation and creation sessions with the community so they can hear those ideas right back from the folks that will actually use it. When they then did the prototype to get feedback on both of these, they printed out a large-scale map and then put some Legos on top of it to show this is where we're thinking the zip line would go. This is where we think it should go across the river, alongside of it. And then folks came in and said, I want to change it to here, here, and here. I don't think people would use it because X, Y, and Z. There's no parking downtown. There's no this, there's no that. And so we actually got to engage with folks and understand what they think a zipline and water light show would be and how it would be successful in Cedar Rapids. And then lastly, they did implementation. One more slide. Thank you. So this is where you actually take all of that feedback and create a pilot. Again, a pilot isn't a final version because you're always constantly iterating in this process. You're going to have check-in points, but it is that moment where you can finally take a breath, say you've engaged as many people as you could. You've gone out, you've done one-on-one interviews, you've done focus groups, you've observed how people use the riverfront, and you have all of this feedback on what people think of both the zipline and the water light show. How are we actually going to put it into action? Cities have some money, at least in America, not all that much to do as much as they would like to. And so this is where you have to be creative as well of how are we going to get this off the ground? And so in Cedar Rapids specifically, they have a couple huge corporations that are there, one being General Mills. And just a fun fact about Cedar Rapids, now that you know so much about it, is sometimes they have things they call crunchberry days, meaning when they're creating crunch berries at the factory, the entire town smells of the crunchberry cereal, which I just think is absolutely fabulous and something they should market much more. But when they did this, they're reaching out now to General Mills to have a session with them to showcase what they're thinking, how they're really understanding that we're going to start small with a pilot, but where do you see that we can pull the lever here? And what would really get you to buy into this and engage and perhaps even put up some money? Maybe we can have the General Mills zip line and just understand what other components that we need to get on board so this will be successful. Because a key component of human-centered design is, yes, we need to speak to the residents, and that's really the core of what it is. But you all know to do anything, you really need to have buy-in from the folks that make the rules. So we do end up talking to city council. We do end up showcasing this process. And what we find really powerful here is taking out some of those quotes anonymously, of course, from that first discovery phase when we did interviews, from what we heard from ideation and prototyping. What are folks actually saying in the community about these ideas? And often when leaders, decision makers, anyone that has any sway over this, hears quotes from their fellow community members, it really pushes the needle on where they are excited to engage and how much they want to engage. Okay, that's it for Cedar Rapids. We're about to dive into the case study where I'm going to engage a little bit of y'all. Any questions though before we go into that? Otherwise, I'll keep moving forward. No? Okay. Feel free to use the chat if helpful. So now you all are going to be putting on your human-centered design hats. We're going to do a quick case study together. We'll see how many folks are using the chat, but it should be a little bit fun just to dip your toes into what this could look like in your case, given I'm guessing you all aren't city government officials. So, next slide. Wonderful, thank you. So I made a fictional community called Nouvelle in Anticosti, Quebec, because I saw this beautiful island on a map the other day and found it to be very cool. And so I threw it in this presentation. The population is only 675 folks with, and again, fictional, with 70% of people over 50. So a larger senior or older adult population. The fictional case that we're actually hoping to address is loneliness. Let's say you, a youth person in the community, realize folks aren't really getting together. Even though you have a small island community of 675, you feel like there's a real lack of connectivity and therefore there's loneliness in your community. And what you want to do is engage the community in the creation of ideas and pilot initiatives to address that loneliness. And so what we're going to be doing today, although I wish I could go through a whole human-centered design process with you, our programs normally take about at least 6 months, so I won't be able to do that, but we're going to be doing 2 key things. One, brainstorming innovative ways to engage with residents, because that's sometimes the hardest part. I'm mentioning interviews. I'm mentioning reaching out to folks that aren't already in the decision-making room. But how do you do that? What are some creative ways you can do that? Is it sending an email? Is it guerrilla style where you're on the street asking folks to engage with you for 5, 10 minutes, hear their thoughts on this? So I really want us to brainstorm innovative ways to do that. And then, again, the fun part, the ideas. We're going to brainstorm as many ideas as possible to address the issue of loneliness in our community. If we had more time, we'd do more problem framing, we'd prototype, but we won't have time today. I just want us to dip our toes in a little bit. Okay, let's get started. One more slide. So our first task, again, is brainstorming innovative ways to engage residents, engaging those specifically that are often marginalized, often not brought to the table, don't maybe have connections to decision makers, maybe don't have connections to the community as much. How are we hearing from them? So what I want us to think about, I'm going to set a timer for a couple minutes for us to think about this, but I do want to give you some guidelines of how is this different than just brainstorming like you've always done? How is this the human-centered design process? So before I set some timer, I'm going to run through some key components, and those will be under tips as well. The first one I want to mention is deferring judgment. I don't want you to think or say anything negative about your ideas. This is a crucial human-centered design rule and one that's very hard, especially if you find yourself in the perfectionist bucket of the world. You cannot critique your ideas as they're being generated here. This is a pretty important rule here. So there is suspending your critic. There's no filter allowed. We're not judging at this point. This is just us to get all our ideas out there. Another one is encourage wild ideas. Even in this prompt, when we're not even thinking of ideas for loneliness, we're thinking about how to engage residents. How crazy can you go? The crazier, the better. We can always dial them back later, but sometimes those most impossible, ridiculous, even financially unfeasible ideas often spark a practical, innovative one later, or kind of lead us down the line there. So try to generate any ideas that would require maybe, for an example, an unlimited budget, or there's some impossible technology, like let's do a trip to the moon to have our interview. Another one is yes and thinking. If you're familiar with that comedy, I'm forgetting what kind of comedy, but there's improv comedy. You always say yes and you agree and you move on. So this is a technique you won't use as much in this prompt, but it's really core to human-centered design. It forces people to build on a previous idea rather than rejecting it. So for example, let's say one person says, let's make a bike that flies. Someone else, instead of saying, no, we don't know how to make a bike that flies, you say, yes. And the wheels are actually fans that generate power when it moves. Just continuing to build on that optimistic mindset of how you can create a new system, a new world. Lastly, this is something that helps most folks is sketching. Not everyone works when you just have an individual think time. So feel free to do simple drawings, diagrams. You can add words. You don't need words. Sometimes this is easier to understand and generate depending on your learning and processing method. So feel free to do that without getting bogged down in all the detail. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes on my phone. I'll check in about halfway through so we can see how folks are going. But what I'm asking you to do is on a sheet of paper, on your computer, write down as many ways as possible that you can think to engage residents in addressing the loneliness in our imaginary community in Anticosti, Quebec. How does that sound? Okay. I'm going to give 3 minutes. No need to write them in the chat. At the end, I am going to ask you to put your favorite one down, and we'll see all the creative ways that you thought to engage residents. Okay, starting now. We are about halfway through the 3 minutes, so about a minute and a half left. Okay, about 15 more seconds. So start finishing up your wonderful list of how you may engage residents in new and unexpected ways. And before we move on, I'd love if everyone can share one of their favorite ideas in the chat that they thought of how to engage residents in our wonderful fictional community. A beach day. Oh, I love that. Get the community together. Connecting to a local elementary school for group visits, like pen pals in real life. Yeah, schools are wonderful. As long as we get the proper consent with minors, it is so lovely to hear the youth perspective. Yeah. Oh, wow. That lets them build their own town or select their own amenities. That would be incredible. Yeah, and there's in person, virtually, all of those. Free food is critical in the programs that we run with my organization. We even have something that we call an equity fund. So we often give gift cards to folks that have an hour-long interview with us. We often, like Tara said, have free food at the event, whether that's pizza or a local business that folks want to support. It's something that we take really close to our heart. Oh, a boat as a floating community center. Oh, wow. Like mini expeditions. SOI does have a lot of inspiration for what could be done here. Markets. Yes, folks love going to vintage markets. And it's also something that Kirsten said brings together creatives as well as promoting some sustainability there. Yeah. Oh, pickleball. My mom would love that someone said that. I think folks are excited. Alrighty. Feel free to put any other ideas. Oh, free yoga on a steamship. That also makes me think of a sauna event, if you're up there. So feel free to continue adding your ideas in the chat. But we're going to move on to our second activity as we wind into the last 15 or so minutes of us being here together. But thank you for sharing your ideas. Okay, one more slide. So now we're moving on to our second activity of thinking of creative ideas to address loneliness in Nouvelle. This is the first step of doing, again, quantity, not quality. We want to find the maximum number of potential solution paths. So I'm actually going to set a timer again in a moment for 3 minutes to write down or type up as many ideas as possible to address loneliness in Nouvelle. So some of y'all already mentioned some of the things. We can do markets. We can have small boat community center meetups. But I want you to write as many as possible. I'm looking for like 20 or so. They don't have to be fully fleshed out because we'll do that after. So think about things like, where are these older residents already? What form of communication do they normally use? Who are some people, what's the word we normally, it's community validators. A phrase that we see in human-centered design is community validators. People that have the trust and the connections within the community that you can chat with to find folks that you don't normally talk to or you maybe don't have the connections with. So often we see this in religious institutions in the community. That's a really good one, as well as folks that do outreach for social services. They have a ton of wonderful connections in the community, especially to the folks that we don't often bring into decision-making processes. I just want to mention one thing that I think is an interesting comparison before we start this brainstorming is, why are we doing quantity, not quality right now? So how I sometimes explain this is ideation is like mining for diamonds or gold or whatever you want to mine for. When you start digging, you don't instantly find a flawless, massive stone. You dig up tons of earth, rocks, and sediments. Most of it you're not going to use. It's somewhat worthless, except for the wonderful worms and things that are in there. But you do have to process it all eventually to find those one or two precious stones, those precious ideas. So your goal right now is to dig up that earth. It's to generate ideas. If you stop digging every time you find a cool looking rock, you might stop before you get that massive diamond, that wonderful idea. So we just need that sheer volume to increase our probability of hitting that breakthrough idea. A lot of people say your most brilliant idea is currently hiding behind your 5 worst ideas. So I'm actually going to do the timer only for 3 minutes now and continue writing down as many ideas as you can to address loneliness. And then we're going to share out one more time. Okay, starting the timer now. Just over halfway through. Okay, last 15 seconds. Start wrapping up what you're writing. Remember, no idea is too silly right now. Okay, we're at 3 minutes. So pencils down, Now I want everyone to quickly look at your list, choose your absolute favorite idea that you thought of, maybe just the title, one quick sentence, a phrase, and I'd love for you to drop it in the Zoom chat. So we should see a few ideas appear here that we're then going to build off of. So let's see what other ideas folks thought of. Ooh, Luma. Yes, I just got introduced to that. It's wonderful as an app. City events, community groups, yes. Oh, rainbow spotting walks. That's also a somewhat new concept for me, but I absolutely love it. After storms and rain. Yep, cost can be a barrier. In-person meetups, drop-ins at the community center for coffee, open to all, no cost. That's a great one. Okay, so while you're seeing all of these pop up, I want you to take one because I want you to pick one that isn't yours. An issue we sometimes see in human-centered design is people get attached to their idea. They get tethered. They kind of feel responsible and excited about it. And while that's great, that introduces bias that maybe isn't always getting to exactly what the residents want. And so what I'm going to ask you to do now, I'm not going to do it for 5 minutes. We're only in the last 10 minutes of this session, is I'm going to put the timer on for 1.5 minutes. So just 90 seconds. And I want you to choose an idea that was not yours and start building on it. Add a few details to it, add some logistics. So for example, if someone said a community garden, I know we didn't, but you could add on a mobile community garden and it visits different neighborhoods via a trailer on a schedule, ensuring folks that maybe don't walk as far, have mobility issues, especially for the senior population, can still participate. Something like that. 1.5 minutes. And this one you can share. You won't have to. I won't force you. But I'd love to just see what details and where your mind goes when you're in this creative, positive creation space. Okay, 1.5 minutes on the clock. Go ahead. You're halfway through, 45 more seconds. Continue adding those details. Twenty more seconds here. And if you do want to share, I'd love to see it in the chat. Visits to and from the local animal shelter. Could it lead to a permanent adoption? Dog walking and exercise. I love that, Mac. It's wonderful. And also leveraging what's already in the community as well. Okay, time's up. If you want to share your final idea, again, you are more than welcome to. This is just an exercise to start thinking a little bit differently about when we do think of issues. So sometimes the prompts we'll give people are, if you had to create an idea and there isn't gravity on Earth, what would you think of? If you had to create an initiative on the moon, on Mars, how would you do that? So it's all of these kind of things that seem a little crazy and very innovative and maybe not useful. They build back into a trust the process mentality. And later on, you see the fruits of your labor and you see all of these wonderful ideas like Matt, like Kirsten, like Scott, all brought to life in the chat. So it's really moving away from a general problem. Ooh, multi-use pickleball courts. Ooh, different events, different sports. Can be a skating rink in the winter. Skill sharing. Oh, I love that. The older cohort can share their skills and the youth can too, because I'm sure folks have different areas of expertise that will then benefit the whole community. Weekly Zoom calls, oh, scheduled companionship, more daily structure. These are all wonderful, wonderful ideas. Square dancing, something I've never done, but again, that's the point. It's something that really, again, doesn't have to be flashy, but something that just gets out of the normal hum of this is what the community always does. Something that feels different, that's created differently, that's speaking to the different people, so we really can understand what's going to be most effective for the folks on the ground. Okay, that's the end of our exercise here. What I'd love us to do, the last time you'll use the chat, I promise, is switch to the next slide. And I just want to ask you, this is a very basic 101 on human-centered design. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I don't know if I put my email anywhere, but it's just lily@thecenterforpublicimpact.org. So feel free to reach out to me if you're more interested in human-centered design, in government innovation, in using this in your personal life. I know I use some of these concepts when I'm wrestling with an issue. But my last question for all of you all, before I turn it over to any Q&A for myself, is where could you see yourself using this framework in your everyday life? Whether that's school, social work. Yes, Michaela. Oh, wonderful. No skating rink. School, work, personal life. And there's all these toolkits and frameworks. I can send you one that's government innovation specific if you want a toolkit for human-centered design. Of course, you'll have to adjust it to your own concept based on where you are. But it is something that just gives you these fundamentals of how do you problem solve differently if something's not working, if something's not as effective as you would have hoped it would have been. Okay. We are mainly done. We can shift on over as everyone brainstorms how you'd use this framework in your everyday life. I know we only have 4 minutes left, so thank you all for joining. Thank you for your energy, enthusiasm, using the chat. I know sometimes you log on to these calls and you don't really anticipate engaging. So thank you for doing that and being present and letting me share all of the love of human-centered design that I have. Now that we have a couple more minutes, do y'all have any questions for me? I'll wait a couple more seconds. I know typing can sometimes take a while. Yeah, vocal minority versus silent minority. So this is something that we often hear about is when we talk about, we normally start with the silent minority. That's where we want to hear our initial reflections. A lot of times the vocal minority is someone that's more in the phase of keep them in, we often use a 2x2 on this. They're in the corner of keep them engaged, keep them happy, but they're not going to be always the folks that we design for because we haven't heard from that silent, I don't know if you said majority or minority, but we haven't heard from those silent folks. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to work a bit differently. So we have these quadrants of people we need to collaborate with and learn from. But we also have folks that we just need to keep abreast with what we're doing. So sending updates on how this is working, sending opportunities for them to come to an ideation session, to come to a prototyping session. But they're not always going to be the focus like they are in more traditional town halls where you can get up and speak as however you want, because how we facilitate this process really necessitates equality when we go through, because we're looking at the ideas not as much tied to who said them, but just the patterns and the themes that we're seeing. But it's something that we struggle with. Human-animal conflicts like coyotes. I've not worked on that, but it is something that's really interesting. You have to do stakeholder mapping when you do a full human-centered design process, which could be a whole session in and of itself. And one thing that we're starting to do more is how do you have nature as a stakeholder? How do you bring that in for those that don't speak English, like coyotes? How do you really represent So it's still emerging. There are some concepts and ways that people have been doing it really successfully, but it also takes on an even more fun and even more creative way of how do you represent the coyotes' interests and how do you make sure they're advocated for? And so it's a fun one. It's not one that cities have dealt with me yet, but it's something that you could definitely use this for. Okay. I know we only have a minute left, so I just want to say thank you. You now have this framework. Go use it. Enjoy the rest of the summit. If you have any questions, want to delve deeper into this, reach out to me. I love human-centered design and can share a million examples of what folks have done in it. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Have you been encouraged by seeing municipalities and design start to move past things like hostile architecture? Yes. The first phase that we do when we do this program is understanding what trauma has been caused by cities thus far and how we need to alleviate that. So working with the unhoused communities one, so hostile architecture you see all over in cities when you're thinking about the unhoused community. And so calling that out, people are really scared to talk about things like that. And so making sure they come to light and we have a whole conversation on them. Normally the folks in our programs are already excited about this, so they're ready to just learn and change their mindset, but it's not something that's easy. It's something that depends on the politics of everyone's city. Thank you, Hazel. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone that said thank you that I did not see. Bye. Bye, Justin. Bye, Tammy.
Thank you so much, Lily. That was an amazing presentation. I personally have not heard of human-centered design, so I learned so much from this. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience in the case studies, and those activities were really, really interesting and fun and engaging. So thanks so much for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Michaela, and thanks to the whole SOI Foundation for the opportunity. If anyone has questions, let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the wonderful summit that they've prepared for y'all.
Awesome. Thanks. See you later, guys.